the layman in theology never even thought of in their entire life. So there's no link there. The reason that someone takes religion to be obvious is, again, as I say, just because someone told them so. I don't. Yeah, I think there's a difference. I should probably think of I'm trying to think of an obvious fact. I'm not very good at examples on the spot.
Well, a thing that people would think is obvious facts is that things that are and things that aren't, and that when we speak of like substantial things, we speak of things
Wait, sorry,
like
did
kind of
you non-contradiction? Sorry, is that what
no no
you said? Things that are and things that
yeah, things
aren't.
are just what they are. Like they just are, and they aren't what they aren't. Uh, this more closely connects to like the idea of substantiality, where what is it to be a substantial thing? It's something that doesn't change, something that's it's pretty solid, either in some metaphorical sense or in a physical sense. But when you look into the world, we don't really have things that are substantial in the ways that we think are obvious at all. Everything that we notice in the world is a process of some sort. It's not a thing
Because
so much as a very drawn out event.
if you're talking about laws of logic, right? I don't think that
No, not laws of
these
logic, just what we think objects are.
what we think are obvious. It's very vague when you say if you don't mean the laws of logic. I'm not exactly getting this idea of things that are and things that aren't, and
No,
if
no,
it's
no.
substantial.
Like the forget about that part. It's kind of irrelevant. Really, it's a very abstract metaphor. But when we speak about like substantial objects, you have a can in front of you. Say I have a soda can right here in front of me. Squirt. Um, it seems like it is what it is. It doesn't change. It's pretty solid. It's stable. Um, it's just an inert object. It is static. Uh, but things aren't actually that way at all. That's the way we generally perceive them. Uh, but there's nothing literally in our experience that is actually in that way. Everything that we experience is some kind of process. It's really just one very drawn out event. Some events are faster, some events are slower. Some events are highly interconnected, some of them are very abstract.
So your example is that a soda can as a soda can would be an obvious thing, right? That's
Yeah.
well, no. So again, as we talk about, like, you think that anything obvious when looked at critically would seem not obvious, but I do still think when you look at the idea of a soda can being a soda can, quote unquote critically, would still be obvious. Because for me, the way I would describe a soda can being a soda can in a critical sense is uh, that we just give names to things, right? Like it's just an effect of language, but we have a thing that is common in the world, soda cans, and we ascribed it to the name. We ascribed the name or the title soda can to it that a lot of people use. That's a more complex, critical way of thinking about it, but that is a rather obvious answer to me. Like it's very obvious, and that's why we call it a soda can
Mm.
because everyone else does.
No, no, I would say that's not critical enough. I would say, if you're trying to look at what is a soda can, these things of colors, for example, something like color, we say like, oh yeah, there's
If
such
you
like
went deeper
color.
than
Color
I
is
did,
just an experiential thing.
wouldn't be obvious, then I wouldn't say that would be. Then you'd be talking about a completely different thing. Because
No,
if you
this
went
isn't talking
deeper
about
than I
completely
did,
different things. Like for example, do you know like about the difference of like what you experience as color and like what physically is colorful? Like one of those is wave. The physical side is just wavelengths, and the subjective side is
I'm
well, you
aware of
experience different
that
colors.
color is just like the way our eyes perceive things. It's not
Right, right. And so
technically.
so you would say, oh, color yellow is either just what I immediately experience, or if you're a bit more advanced, you might know some color theory. And the color yellow is in certain relationship to say red and blue. But then the physicist would say, no, what color actually is these wavelengths of light. It's the wavelengths. So you're like, yellow is, and they're like, yellow is actually this specific wavelength. And so it might seem obvious to you that yellow is just, this kind of immediate experience you have of a color, what we call a color. But what is yellow in actuality when you're critical about it and you try to find out, in that point of view of the physicist, it's yellow is actually just a wavelength of light. Doesn't matter whether you see it.
And I've actually forgotten what this stemmed from.
No, I'm just saying, like, it's an obvious thing that when you
No, like,
go
no,
into
like I
what it
understood what you
is.
said. I'm kind of. I'm thinking. I'm not even confused by what you said. Like you made a coherent point. Like I'm not saying you weren't coherent because you were. But for some reason, I'm forgetting what this stemmed from because I'm trying to link it back to the original question, and
Whether
I've
God is
forgotten.
obvious, and like whether like
Yeah, and then what was the first thing you said? I,
uh,
don't- I forgot what the ultimate point that we were trying to establish here. Well, I know the ultimate point.
I said God seems likely obvious in that it is one of the earliest ideas that we have.
Oh yeah. No, I can't. I don't know how I've lost track of this, but yeah, that was the start. So I don't know if color if that really relates to uh, the idea of like everyone accepting it and that makes it obvious. Because I just in general, I guess this isn't really a refutation of that point, but this is I guess just going back to the original point because I didn't really know what to say to that. Like if you accept some, because I accept that, right? I accept if you believe something because everyone else is saying it, that is a valid and justifiable reason to believe. In fact, probably most things that you believe is just because everyone else says so, and you know you don't have the time to critically think about everything. Um, but I don't think that I just don't think that means it's obvious. I just think that means that's your justified reason to believe in it. Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't give a more direct response to your point. I don't know how I got lost. I just can't think.
Yeah, let me look something up real quick. Sometimes etymology is very enlightening. What is the etymology of obvious? Obvious. No.
Sorry?
Looking at the etymology of obvious. Latin obviam, in the way, obvious, in the sense of frequently encountered. No, actually, that's exactly so. The fact that it's just generally accepted, frequently encountered, is what obvious is. Huh.
Well, I wouldn't really. When I think obvious, I'm thinking something that is true and something that doesn't require much thinking to arrive at the conclusion that it is true.
Oh, sure, and that's kind of what happens with things that are frequently encountered. They're obvious because most people are going to catch on to them without much prodding towards it.
So see, earlier, I say earlier, like 5 seconds ago, when I was trying to make the distinction that it's not that it makes it obvious, that it's just a justified reason for belief. When everyone thought the Earth was flat, they were completely justified in thinking so. But but it seems that you might say that it was obvious that the Earth was flat, but that doesn't sound right to me. It wasn't obvious that the Earth was flat; they were just justified in thinking that it was flat.
Well, it was obvious given what people knew at the time. Like who had circumnavigated the globe to know that like it the land would be curved. Besides people who were sea peoples, who had access to the most obvious proof against that, which required mathematical knowledge uh, of geometry at the time uh, to
It,
be able to calculate.
it's
Uh,
obvious that they would come to that conclusion. But all that means, though, is that the shape of the Earth was not an obvious fact. The fact that the Earth is round, the shape of the Earth is not an obvious question until like you do the maths, or if you take a rocket ship and look from far away, and then it becomes obvious. When you gain certain information, the answer becomes obvious. But back then, I don't think the answer was obvious. It was just obvious the conclusion they would come to.
um, yes and no. Like it depends. One, nobody knew how big the expanses of land were, or how big the oceans were, whether there was any sort of return, or whether there could be. They didn't, because there were, like, as far as you go backwards in time, the idea of a spherical Earth and the ideas of flat Earth. Actually, the flat Earth comes out after the ideas of spherical Earth, strangely enough. But the spherical ideas of Earth don't come from like people actually knowing this, as far as we can tell, anyways. They come from very well weird, esoteric, religious beliefs.
But you think the idea of spherical Earth came from religious beliefs?
Yes, it's actually older than the flat Earth. The flat Earth is kind of a far later thing.
I've never heard of this. Do you have a source? Because genuinely, yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about. I find this hard to believe.
You can look back into mythology. Look back as far as the Sumerians and stuff. The idea of a spherical Earth is old.
The what,
Even
sorry?
even in the Bible, for example, like there's mentions of the spherical Earth, but this is based on like really ancient stuff.
Isn't the resurgence? I say resurgence. Isn't that recent? In the last like decade, where flat Earth has been more talked about than it was in decades prior. Isn't that because of the Bible, the flat Earth?
No, it's because of a CIA ploy, and I'm serious. It's a CIA ploy.
Yeah, it's
Just
like
like
UFO.
just like UFOs, like the CIA seen this idea and actually nurtured it and actually had this promoted by certain algorithms knowingly, as a way to poison certain ideas so that they have a certain thing to point to as a boogeyman of pseudoscience. So this did not organically arise with Christian morons as much as we might think that it does.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be like. Well, I don't even know what religion you are, but like, I'm not trying to be like, oh, Christians so stupid because some Christians believe the Earth is flat. But the idea that instead of just accepting, oh, they. In fact, the thing you said doesn't even refute what I said. You said like they're making the topic seem more apparent by like boosting in algorithms. For them to do that, people still need to come to the conclusion that the Earth is flat and make those opinions public for them to make these more common. So, and I'm just saying where are these opinions coming from? And as far as I know, most people that think the Earth is flat are also Christians that are like, hey, it says it in the Bible.
Yeah, I think it is like it's like a Christian thing.
Yeah, it's a mostly Christian thing, but the Hindus have that as well. Actually, they are the ones who have like that idea originally. You know, they have the whole mythology that in one of their the Puranas, the Earth is
On a turtle.
flat. It's on top of a turtle's back, on top of another. You know, it's all turtles all the way down. That's where that whole thing comes in.
The sun goes into Allah's throne when it sets, or something like that. Like I think the sun actually goes somewhere else when you can't see it, which implies that someone else can't see it on the other side of the Earth.
Yeah, you have stuff like that even in Greek stuff. You know, the there is no underside of the Earth. Well, there's an underside of the Earth, but it's kind of an empty underside. And the sun enters into that, and blah blah blah. But anyways, like as far as like the more immediate stuff, given like one's more immediate foundations, the more obvious conclusion is the world is flat.
Yeah, so I just think there's might be slight misunderstanding because to be fair, most things that I would call obvious that we would agree on are obvious will be things that are said by everyone. It's just in most cases those things happen at the same time. If no one was saying something, it probably wouldn't be that obvious. But there are going to be cases where something is one.
Yeah. I think just in the regular way that people tend to use obviousness, that's just what it means. In the more etymological way of of VM, the way, or in the way of. It's like saying that following a certain train, a certain path, it's something that is in the way, and therefore you can't ignore it. It's just like, well, do squares have 90-degree angles? Well, if you have the square, you can't help but have 90-degree angles. If you ignore it, well, then you're just gonna be stupid and stumble on it.
Yeah, and that's like just definitionally what a square has, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
by
And so
definition.
it's obvious. It's obvious in the way that like it's just necessary once you have like a certain amount of the square.
Do you think God is obvious?
Sorry?
Do you think God is obvious, Antonio Wolf?
That's what I was saying earlier. That it seems to me that God probably is obvious, given how early a concept it is.
Oh, how early a concept it was. So I tackled the idea of it like everyone's saying it. So I don't. For that I have to heavily disagree.
Well,
I don't know. Like I could give you countless examples of things that are early concepts that wouldn't be obvious. Like,
Well, I mean, like
that,
historically, this is an early concept.
no, yeah, I agree that it is an early concept, but like things that are obviously wrong are also commonly early concepts.
Oh, yeah.
Like I see
Well,
this pointed to a lot. You're doing it in a much nicer way. A lot of people do this in a bad faith way. So I at least appreciate you for not being like those people. But it's just they'll phrase it in a sort of way of like, bro, like people have believed in God for like thousands of years, and then like all these atheists coming about all of a sudden trying to deny it is ridiculous.
Look, man, the earliest humans all believed in shitting in a hole in the ground, so that's what I'm gonna do. All right.
Yeah, that's kind of what it sounds like. Like it's obvious we should be shitting in holes in the ground, guys.
Well, that's what I'm gonna do. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you think God is. Like, God
Yeah,
is
that's
not
what
an
I was gonna say.
object
Why,
that's
shalom.
ever
What's
been
going
of the
on?
same kind as,
I
say,
know there's
an empirical object.
I typically do go with like when I say God, I typically go with like kind of the Abrahamic concept. I think most people can agree on a definition of a conscious creator of the universe. I
Personal,
think that's a good.
personal God.
I guess personal too. I typically just stick with conscious. People like to add extra characteristics, but for me, conscious creator of the universe is a good like fairly vague but still specific term for God. I think it's a good
So,
definition.
so
I've heard
I have
somebody
I
say
have two
God
things in
transcends
response
the
to say
whole.
to you, Antonio Wolf.
A bunch of people were talking.
I heard someone say I have a response, and then they just didn't say anything.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I don't know if you heard me. Well, okay. So the first of what I would like to say involves the distinction that Pika made earlier, between a belief being obvious and a thing being obvious. You said God is obvious because people commonly have the idea of him, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I
Sure.
mean the
That's
distinction.
literally the definition of obviousness. It's just
For me, it
commonly
was like
Well,
encountered.
no, it's not, because the second of what I would like to say is that while people do often have an idea of God, that is nothing but a linguistic trick, because people's ideas of God are very different from each other, of course.
Yeah, right. That's nice, but that's not what I was kind of trying to get at.
What were you trying to get at? That like some ambiguous concept is obvious?
No, well, it's not ambiguous. It's just abstract. The concept of God initially is just a really abstract concept. It does not really state anything other than this is the highest being, whatever that might be. If you look at the history, if you look at the history of religions, for example, the very early ideas of God do not concern any personal being. They do not even concern the idea of a creator. as any conscious entity other than the universe itself. They're quite naturalistic. What they see is, however, they're not talking about nature in the way that we think about nature today, nature as physical. They talk about nature in forms of powers. They talk about, you look at the Greek stuff, it's chaos, and, from chaos comes certain other things. I forget what they do. And you get these like the Titans, Chronos, time, and these represent the different dimensionalities of reality, whatever they may be. But ultimately, people understand the world is constituted by one reality. There is some highest point of this reality, but for a long time, there is no agreement upon what exactly this is beyond the fact that it's the highest reality, and it does not give a fuck about us. And so people
So
don't
you're
pray
just
to the
saying that
highest
the
God.
idea of perfection is obvious?
Yeah, that's one of the ideas that leads to God. It's not an empirical idea, but people somehow have it.
Well, I mean, that's a very unremarkable claim.
Well, yeah, I don't know that I was trying to be remarkable, because
Why do you
most
want
people don't see
God to
me.
be immediate, bro?
Sorry?
Why do you want God to be subsumed into immediacy? Do you not see realization as something interesting, or just that's just the end of your philosophy?
Who were you talking to?
You.
You're very
You.
quiet.
I don't see how that's relevant to anything that I've said.
Well, yeah,
Why
why are you having this discussion?
This is copper, dude.
Oh, the title of the room is God obvious, and so I'm just talking about
Well, it's so
how that may or may
ambiguous.
not
If all you're saying is that we have the idea of a perfect thing, no one would disagree with that, and so you seem to be having a conversation with a very different grounding from everyone else here.
Well, I mean, I have a historical understanding of this concept. Obviously, the concept that people have about God today is not the one that they've always had. But there is a continuity between all the concepts of God and the current concept of God.
Is
Uh,
God obvious if you don't believe in
That's
God?
crazy.
I don't know. I don't know.
Man,
Okay, so
I just
me in the side chat saying the trolls are polluting the discussion. I don't know. No one sounds like they're trolling. Who are you accusing of trolling?
want to say this is a great chat to listen to while I play video games.
Yeah, I think the hood is the only one here trolling.
Yeah, dude. AW
Is
goes
someone-
hard from weed, bro.
Wait, how am I trolling? I've been on mute this whole time.
What?
If someone is trolling, I'll kick them. But I haven't heard any trolling so far. So.
No,
My
I
silly,
wouldn't say
how
so.
can I troll without even talking?
I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know if it was a
this
stupid
this Dark
question,
Master
but
guy seems to dislike me. He banned me from his server.
Oh, is he talking about you? Okay, then the thing I've talked
He
to this guy
could be.
before, and I don't remember what our conversation was about, but I don't think it went very well. So actually, he might be the troll. I don't know.
there's a
Well,
troll.
what I wasn't saying anything during your conversation. It didn't go well, which spurred my communication to Antonio Wolf. Yeah, Antonio Wolf. What did you ban me from your server? Or maybe that was Dark Master.
Whatever. I had a
No,
question.
I mean,
Maybe it's a
it was
stupid
me,
question,
but
but
it's irrelevant to the chat right now.
maybe it's a stupid question, but
Mycelia's very intelligent. Why would you ban Mycelia?
Oh, I mean,
I have a question about the topic.
Yeah, sure.
What's up, AW?
Okay, what's your question about the topic?
I
Get the
couldn't
room
hear you.
in.
You
Yeah.
mumbled on your sentence or whatever.
No, I was clear. Okay,
No,
so
you
my
were talking
question.
AW, dude.
Oh, okay. Well, my question is, I forgot.
Wow.
Guys kept. Anyways, no, I remember now. My question is, how can God be obvious if you don't believe in God? So do you have to believe in God for this question to make sense?
Obviously.
No, I mean, like for example, okay. Do you think reality is all there is?
Yes, yeah,
Right. Would you say that's the universe?
yeah.
Would you say that there is a top level of reality beyond which, within the universe, the universe is what determines everything else within it as to what it is and how it is. But there's nothing beyond the universe that determines the universe as to how it is and what it is.
Yeah, there's no like creator, godlike creator that created the universe. No, there's just the universe.
Right, right. And then as far as the universe goes, the universe is the one that gives itself its own rules for what it is, because there's nothing else that would make it be. So whatever it is according to, well, whatever it makes itself be. Right?
I'm sorry, one more time.
That as far as the universe goes, like how it is and what it is, since it's not determined from some external source, and it cannot be pre-given, the universe has to be the source of itself, of what it is and how it is. So, it gives itself its own structure and nature.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, then if you agree with that, then you basically agree with the most primitive idea of God, which is, the highest source or being of reality, and that's what the early people thought. And obviously, people didn't really care about that very much because you don't have a personal connection to that. You can't pray to it. You can't do anything with it. It doesn't give a shit about you. It doesn't listen, and it just is what it is. It does what it does. So that's why people had the quote unquote lesser gods, the multiple pantheons, which are basically in the equivalent of Christianity. These are like archangels and shit, basically. And you pray to those because those are lower beings that are kind of a bit like us, and they have some desires, they have some needs, and they care about certain things. And they'll do some stuff for you. You should do some stuff for them. That's kind of how it was. But this idea of God as just the absolute ultimate reality, that's where that idea first comes forth, really. And like I said, well, maybe you weren't here. I mentioned earlier, this is a very, absolutely poor conception of God, but it is really the first logical conception of God. And then all other conceptions of God proceed from that.
Are you talking about Christianity?
No.
We are not talking about a specific religion at all, no.
Because I feel like in the Bible they're talking about a personal God. It's a guy.
Indeed.
So that's I don't know. Isn't that God? Isn't that a better representation of a singular holistic God than paganism?
I don't think the discussion's heading towards that. But I'm just pointing out that there is something obvious about one of the essential parts of what we define into God today, which is there from really, really early human history, long before even written history for sure.
Okay.
You guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. In regards to your question, like you said, the reason I made this room is from hearing a bunch of theists. Because I'm fine with people believing whatever, but I'm typically fine with disagreements. But when people disagree with someone and they just go they're so stupid for thinking this, it's so obvious. Because this happens to me the other day. So I don't think it requires you to already believe in it. Because obvious things, when someone's talking to someone who doesn't believe in something and claiming that they're stupid for not believing it, that's what it would mean to be obvious, right? Not believing in this thing would require you to be stupid.
Right.
I'm just curious, which one came?
You're curious about what? Sorry.
Which one came first, God or reality?
Well, I don't.
That's a stupid question.
That question is so irrelevant to the discussion we're having because we're talking about if God is obvious, and your the question just presupposes that God exists. Or what?
Well, I'm an atheist, but you guys were talking about reality a second ago. And
I'm also an atheist. I'm the one who made the room and who you were just listening to.
Okay. I was just wondering what you guys thought.
It would depend on what you mean by reality. reality would either have to include God or exclude it. You just like.
Well, I'm just asking the question. I don't believe that a God exists, so I was just wondering what the group thought.
Yeah, and I'm saying like the question is kind of flawed because it would depend on your definition of reality because it's a very vague term.
Everything. That's my definition of reality.
Whatever you think reality is, God is either inside it or outside of it. So it's just a matter of definitions.
Oh, that's your definition of it?
Well, I don't think God exists, so that just doesn't mean much to me.
Oh, I don't think God exists either.
And but regardless of whether you believe in it or not, again, it's just a matter of definition. So, what do you mean? You could answer that question for yourself if you just defined things more rigidly.
Oh, okay. Well, my definition of reality is everything that we can see.
Okay, then God would have to come before reality, then, by your definition.
Well, assuming there is a God, right?
Assuming there is one.
Okay. Cool.
I mean, have you considered that atheism is basically pantheism?
I haven't.
Pika, did you know you've been a pantheist this whole time?
No, I'm finding out new things about myself. I'm going to add this to my worldview.
I mean, there's nothing in pantheism that like the atheist rejects, quite frankly.
Well, the theism.
Am I going to reject
The word
pantheism,
that
the
says
idea of
theism.
believing in multiple gods?
The divinity. The atheist rejects the divinity.
Meaning what?
The theism, the idea that this has anything to do with a god or gods or anything.
But the definition
spiritual.
of God in pantheism is literally God is the substance of reality. That's it.
But there's a belief in a divinity, though.
It's not a belief.
So when I typically think of, when I debate God, I use the definition of a conscious creator. If you want to say a God is a table, yeah, God exists, but then you're just playing, I assume you know this, then you're just being facetious, but yeah, you're just playing silly word games.
No, it's not a silly word game, because like God at least has to be the highest reality. What pantheism says is God as the highest reality is substance. That substance includes both the physical attributes of our world, the intellectual and mental attributes, and whatever other attributes you may want to believe that there exist. God is not a person. God is not somebody who's a creator, with a plan, doing anything. The world is a natural process. Natural not in the physical sense, natural in the sense of a nature of a thing. So insofar as atoms are atoms and the laws of nature are laws of nature, they follow a certain essential structure to their being. And God is the power which determines, enables, and maintains that being. And all that pantheism really states is all of that is really one single unity. There is an actual certain order to the essential reality of the world. And it's probably best for you to get in line with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of this. Yeah, there's this vague notion that like everything is God or like the universe is God. I just don't care to debate it. Right? Like if someone comes to me and they say I'm a pantheism, could you debunk my belief in God? I just say no, I don't care.
Well, no, you should say, well, congratulations, you're an atheist. So am I.
Sure, but that'd be funny. Probably. Yeah.
There's nothing to debate. Like once the definition is cleared out, like I guarantee you, like there can be no disagreement. Unless, of course, you're an irrationalist, in which case, well, you're kind of fucked because you're an irrationalist.
Like I didn't really, I didn't expect a productive discussion to come from the channel title, to be honest, because like I said, it came about from bad faith religious people that just call atheists stupid. So I'm like, I assume it's going to attract those types of people. But I'm happy it did lead to what I thought was a nice discussion. That was surprising to me.
Isn't it usually the atheist who thinks the religious person is stupid?
I you might see that. The only time I see that though is when the theists do it first. I think most atheists, they understand that religion is a pretty reasonable thing to believe in because of how common it is. But it's only when people go like, atheists have no morals, atheists can't account for anything, is when atheists start using that type of rhetoric. Because I use that type of rhetoric, but as you can see, I haven't been using it now because AW has been completely civil with me.
Well, a common example is if you go in like the channels that are like strictly for theological cosmological debate. I'll use the example of this has happened multiple times in servers like this, and even in this server where, or it might be the other politics server, I'm sorry, where I went in a chat and I don't know, yeah, it's usually a Christian or Muslim that does this the majority of the time, but what they'll do is be like, they'll strawman by saying like, you're okay with insert horrible heinous act like murder or kidnapping or abduction, whatever, something like that. And I'll say, no, I don't think that's okay. And they'll be like, well, now you have to prove to me why it's not okay. And I'm like, no, I really don't.
Yeah, honestly, any religious person who goes along the line of thinking of atheists can't have morals so many times, you're actually a horrible human being. I know the type of atheists you're talking about, Madara, are probably talking to theists like that, and theists like that, they deserve every bit of that they get because they're genuinely horrible human beings.
I would actually also propose it's not only atheists they do that to; it's other theists that present from a different religion or belief. They do it to deists as well.
Anyways,
Of
I
course,
actually
like
have a set of arguments that I've developed to explain my view of God, and I'd be interested to get some feedback on that if you would be willing to listen. It's a series of arguments.
Go ahead.
I'm sharing my screen so you can see them. So you just have to take it from my reading.
You've got a presentation.
So it's about 6 arguments. One of them is about reality self-making. Another one's there's a highest unity of being. There's a highest objectivity. The universe is a subject. And then the last one I haven't listed here is the universe is... all of these four first ones, I think, are completely acceptable to the atheists. There's nothing in them that I think the atheists should or could deny. It's only the last one which basically states the universe has personality, ergo, the definition of God that we normally have today. It's probably the only one that you should question.
I have no idea what the fuck you mean. Most objective. I don't think we rank things.
It will be explained in the argument.
Well, I think the universe is a subject because there's people in it, and people are subjects, and they're part of the universe.
But anyways, for some of these, it'll become clear with the arguments because a lot of these are actually multiple arguments to kind of flesh out.
I just don't get it. Why God? Why single ultimate unitary being? That you have to, even if you're just talking about the universe, why summarize it with the word God? Like I don't see the point.
There's a certain part of it that is relevant, and I think I can explain that after we kind of get through it.
It sounds like it's going to be long.
It is long. It's about 17 pages, I think, of arguments.
Yeah, but considering I already had so many problems with the first slide, if it's 17 pages, we're at least if someone else wants to tackle it, they can. But there's no way the discussion would end if I did this.
Well, no, I mean we can go as far as you're willing to go, and so the feedback is welcome. So, anyways, So reality makes itself real.
Just
1, the universe is domain of being or reality. 2, there is no other upon which the universe depends, for beyond it there is nothing. 3, nothing neither conditions nor determines anything. It is not efficacious. 4, conclusion, what makes reality what it is reality itself. 5, if the universe were determined by another, it is then in a domain that determines it and this other, for example, a multiverse. 6, the universe refers to the domain of reality itself, not a finite reality like a planet or galaxy. A multiverse is just the true universe. Therefore, conclusion, there can be no other to the universe, therefore what makes the universe itself must come from itself.
Regardless of what anyone's feedback is going to be, I just want to say I actually commend the effort to make this a presentation because I am way too fucking lazy to ever do something like that.
So am I. And this is only just set up.
Conclusion,
yeah, go ahead.
The ultimate conclusion of this is going to be that. So this is your arguments for God. At the end, the conclusion is going to be that God has realized him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because if this was the thing, I just kind of point out a bit of irony here. If this was the type of thing required to prove God's existence, I think it'd be hard for you to justify that God was also, in fact, obvious.
Well, it's obvious, again, like in the etymology of obvious, that which is on the way through this, it becomes obvious, but only to a certain extent.
It's obvious. The way we mean it is
AW is what makes it obvious.
Like, is God apparent? Is it clear?
That's the thing. Because sometimes I'll see arguments like this that they. And I kind of like how it said, I do commend people for making them. He was commending you making like a whole slideshow, but no, in fact, trying to think these up and try and be like super logical. I commend that, especially when so many theists want to be as fallacious as possible. But the thing is, if this did prove God, one problem I think you'd have is that I assume almost no one else has this exact thing other than maybe other people you've told or maybe some other philosophers that happens to have the same line of thinking as you. So for you to, if this did prove God, you and just a handful of other people would be the only people who had like a justifiable reason to believe in God, and you'd have to like denounce anyone else who believed in God because they probably don't believe in God for a reason that you do.
I don't really have to denounce anybody else.
You'd be accepting them believing things for a bad reason.
Look, this is not a... Like, the reason I say that is, it's not my business to, believe me, God cannot possibly give a fuck about what stupid people believe.
How could it be? Well, God is like a limitless being, so I never understood the thinking that he wouldn't care about anything.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying God could not give a fuck about stupid people being wrong. God knows what they're wrong. God knows why they're wrong. God knows the kind of cognition and the kind of past that they have. It's not in my business to change their ways. I can tell them about it, sure, and I will eventually tell a lot more people than just you guys about these views. My business is to put it out there, and if people believe it, great. If not, I did my due diligence, and that's their fate.
Wait, are you saying there's going to be there's consequences to not believing?
No, that's not consequences to not believing. Any more than there's consequences to not believing that you don't need water. Well, if you don't believe that you need water, you'll find out.
So if I don't believe in God, I'll find out.
Okay, so your answer is yes, there are consequences.
Well, yes, but the consequence is in the same way that you don't believe in water. Like, it's not like a moral consequence. It's literally kind of like a physical consequence. Yeah, you find out.
Just answer the question.
Then why are there atheists? Did they not realize that they're dying of thirst for God?
I don't think that being an atheist necessarily leaves you in some kind of thirst of that kind. Like I said, the atheist pretty much accepts God up until God is a person. And the most important parts of God for the current era, I think, isn't God is a person. The most important parts of God is to like just realize that there is an actual reality out there, that you can know it, and that you better get in line with it, otherwise you're gonna get fucked.
What is it like? Is it like Taoism? Like you try to like, seek harmony with the way? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the most intuitive forms of it.
Yeah, but they don't believe in
Yeah.
God.
Well, no, it's not even that they don't believe in that. They don't believe in reality. That's not just for atheists. That seems to be generally for most people today, in the modern first world. Like a lot of people on this server, you know, are people you encounter, and they're like, I don't know that I can actually know the truth of anything. They're like, I don't know that morality is real. I just think it's my preferences. Well, how about you go prefer to drink some motor oil and find out?
Mm-hmm. But I'm saying like even if there's like an ideal way to be in accord with nature and the universe, then that doesn't necessitate a God.
No, because like as far as the personality of God goes, that's a human desire. Just like, you know, most people, they're fine. They don't think on a very like advanced level of society. They think about themselves. They think about their friends, their family, and at best their local community. They don't think about the state. They don't think about shit. They don't even think about the city. They don't think very far ahead. God is a very advanced connection that you require to the world. It's also one of the most immediate ones, but you know, a lot of things happen in your life in which they distract you, and you know, they seem a lot more obvious, and therefore you chase those things as the things that you want. Only after like many pathways in which you've gone down and hit nowhere does it dawn upon somebody like from some kind of experiential fact of lack that, oh, well, you know, maybe the things I've been chasing for aren't the things that really satisfy me. And to find out that, you know, God is the satisfaction of that is a very tall order.
But God fills that void.
Yeah, I mean, I found God. I wasn't looking for God.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm a philosophy nerd. I was a science nerd. You know, I ended up.
What do you think like Buddhism then? Like, because that's all about, you know, accepting, you know, the lack that exists in life and not being able to escape it.
Yeah, the Buddhists also have their own positive versions. I mean, like the vast majority of Buddhists in the world are not Theravada classical Buddhists. They're Mahayanas, and the Mahayana like school is basically just another religion, typical like every other. You know, they have their own deities and like, you know, basically archangels, bodhisattvas, and Buddha nature is not just this negative thing; it's a positive thing. And then, you know, then you have like people like the Zen and the Chan Buddhists, same thing. One is Chinese, the other one's Japanese. And they're like, oh, well, you know, the whole thing about escaping the world, that's not even true. Because when you're enlightened, you find out there's nothing to escape from.
Right.
You know, samsara is nirvana. So, and those people have a very positive view of things. Now, they don't have the best view. I think the Taoists probably have the best substantialist view of pantheism, apart from like certain like very advanced things like say Spinozism in the West.
Well, but I think the way you just summarized Buddhism just now like coincides. Yeah, this is all there is, and you know there is no God. This is it.
Well, no, it's not that there is no God. Well, there's no God that's a person, but there is a God in which like you can experience the totality of reality. You can like achieve nirvana and have, you know, a samadhi experience, and you know, you can experience just pure consciousness, bliss, whatever the hell they call it. Just spaz out on existence, you know.
Yeah, but those are just like state, you know, neurological states.
Well, and that's what you say. That's not what they say. And
well, some of them do. I mean, some of them admit it, and
some of them being who? The Westoids who
well, you know,
don't actually take the religion seriously.
Well, no, Buddhists don't like. Well, not I don't know about Buddhists, but Zen Buddhists in particular, they don't like states. Like yeah, they have to do samadhi and all that to achieve enlightenment and that sort of thing, but they don't like the bliss and all the different the cosmic consciousness, all the different things you can experience in meditation. They see those things as distractions. They see them as like almost like poison.
Yeah, those are some very weird Zen Buddhists you're talking to.
No. I mean, this. Well, I don't know. I'd have to look it up, but
I mean,
it's
there's
well
different
known
schools for a
that.
reason. This
Well,
is
do you
not
know
the common view that I've heard of.
You know who Suzuki Shosan is?
Suzuki. I know DT Suzuki, but I don't know Shosan.
This guy's from the samurai days. But he talks about it. He talks about how he achieved. Well, I don't know. He achieved the state of mind. Evidently, he didn't consider it enlightenment, but he achieved the state of mind where he was like, felt like blissful and at one with nature, and everything he saw was beautiful and wonderful, and he was just overwhelmed with like ocean-like bliss. And he rejected it. He said, "This is just a distraction. This is nothing."
Sounds like an idiot.
Well, I mean, he was searching for enlightenment. He said, "This."
Well, it sounds like an idiot who found the truth and then's like, nah, that can't be the truth.
Well, that's actually I kind of wondered that myself when I first read that, but I feel now that I know what I know now, I feel like it's probably the truth. It's probably whatever enlightenment exists probably doesn't make you feel good like that. I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, if you were not supposed to be, you wouldn't be. And the fact that you're here and that you think that the purpose is to reject it is like the most asinine thing.
Okay, so that's how you view. Well, that's how you view atheists then, or just secular types.
No, I mean, in this case, the atheist is not rejecting anything of the positivity. Like I said, like the atheist, in principle, can accept everything except for the personality of God. The atheist can accept the structure of reality being an objective process of self-determination. They can accept freedom. They can accept free will. They can accept a purposeful existence. The biological universe, for example. There's nothing personal about that. There are atheists who actually believe, well, hey, like maybe the Greeks were actually right. Maybe the ancient like Taoists were actually right. The world is an organism; it's not a mechanism. And what would be unnatural about that? Well, nothing.
And the totality of that organism is God.
Yeah, and obviously organisms have purpose, an internal purpose of an eternal life. The universe is an eternal living being, and the purpose for us is to live our lives in harmony with the process of life around us. Insofar as we're rational, we go along with it. If we're stupid, we'll go ahead and not go along with it, and we'll get destroyed.
Well, we'll all get destroyed. I mean, unless you believe in heaven.
Or you pass away, and the whole idea of energy is eternal and not destroyed is not a new one. The whole idea of Taoism, for example, is that you float with the way, and you find out, well, I am immediately the way in a certain way, but then this is like an eddy in a river. The river flows into the eddy has a specific form, and then the water that goes into the eddy comes right back out of the eddy. And the same water goes in and the same water goes out. And what was I? I was nothing but the form of the eddy. But the substance, which is my substance, was the water that came in and the water that came left out. And just as my form arose from that river, it also dissipates in that river. And so the form arises also from the content from the form. So where is the distinction between, I died or I lived? There's the process and there's moments of that process. And it's part of that process that, as a process, its moments come and go. And only as a totality does it remain. So, sure. If you see yourself in a negative way, and you are attached to your immediate self and see yourself only as this immediate body, Well, yeah, you probably feel sad and think that you die. If you don't see yourself that way, you take the more broad view of the self and say, well, look, I'm an interconnected system. The universe somehow, coalesced into me, and then I'll disintegrate and, it'll flow out into some other coalescing bodies and forms. But, that too is me. And why should I feel bad?
Well, I mean, it's one would argue that it's not you, because you are contingent, and the energy you're talking about, it's not, but you are that. You're that configuration of energy. So when that's gone, then you're gone.
Sure, and that's just a very immediate physicalist view of things. So if you view yourself not as a thing, but as a process, you keep going. What it is to be a subject is, well, it's actually an argument on this set of slides.
Yeah, I know. I know it's in those slides. I like parsimony, personally. I don't like adding unnecessary things.
Yes, but parsimony is parsimony towards something.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Anyways, I don't know if Pika fell asleep on that or not. Maybe we can continue the slides thing or just leave it at that.
Well, here's the thing. Here's one simple reason why I'll never be a theist is because for me, for anything I would regard as God, it would have to be able to dispense justice, and there's nothing like that exists.
Justice meaning what?
Like justice for injustice, similar to how they claim it goes in the Bible.
Well, yeah, but like
that would have to be real. Like for me to believe in God, that would have to be real. I'd have to see evidence of that.
It depends on what
divine justice.
It depends hugely upon what. Well, there's a distinction. There's what you believe to be God, reality, injustice, and all these other categories, and then there's what these are in fact. Right. I come from a background in philosophy where there is a fact to what these are, and we can know what these are. And the way we do know what they are is we got to start from absolute ground zero. No presupposing of like, oh, well, we define God this way. Fuck whatever you define God. There's a certain way we use God, which is the word God denotes the highest reality. We will have to find out what the highest reality is, and then we could say, and that is what God is.
The word God denotes highest being.
Highest being, highest reality, it doesn't really matter.
It matters a lot. Reality
it matters.
Not necessarily
it matters none, because God can and has been and is to this very day both construed as transcendental to existence. God is not a being, but being itself, and also a being within themselves. But then this is a dual conception, which is a huge problem in religions. For example, all the Abrahamic religions basically have this issue. The Jews go for the more transcendental, God is not a being kind of thing. Or God is beyond being. The Christians, well, I don't know much about Islam. What I've heard about it seems very odd. It's closer to the Judaic view than to the Christian view, but slightly more, a bit more hardened, I suppose. But the Christian view is both transcendental and radically immanent. God is both not a being and still necessarily is a being. So there's a rational reason for why a certain conception ends up happening across history. But just what people happen to believe, whether rightly or wrongly, correctly or not, is kind of irrelevant. The point is we ought to know. So we can't take it for granted, whatever it is that people just happen to believe. So if you think that, for example, justice has something to do with, law of karma, for example, what you give is what you get. That may be what you believe, but is that really what justice in the highest real sense would be?
Right, exactly. So I have to sacrifice my own reason and
No, you don't have to
believe
sacrifice your own
that.
reason.
Well, I have to sacrifice my own sense of justice and assume that justice is being embodied in the world already, and that God exists, and that what God knows to be justice is being already in action presently, which I couldn't possibly believe that ever.
Well, why not? I mean, that's like saying, well, I can't
Because it's
possibly believe
totally
in
contrary.
atoms, but
Well,
the
it's
thing
just
is,
totally contrary to what I believe justice and injustice is.
right.
So.
But why attach yourself to beliefs? I mean, you don't believe in the Bible, right? I assume not.
No, I mean I don't believe in
right,
it. No.
right. Yeah, no. If you ever believed in it, which anybody who has a background in that, to some extent, may have growing up in a Christian household or whatever. Just because it is what you believe, there's a certain higher drive, or at least there should be, to just want to know, well, is what I believe true? That's what I've always wanted. So, when I seek the truth and I find out, what I believed was wrong, yeah, it feels bad, man, but then you understand what is actually true, and it changes your mind. It changes the way you view the world. Once I understood that a lot of people are genuinely stupid, I can't be mad at them. Somebody has to really go out of their way to ruin my day, consistently and on purpose, for me to get mad at them. But somebody just ruining my day because they're stupid rarely happens. Because I understand this person's stupid. They don't even know what the hell they're doing. They don't even know what they've done to ruin my fucking day. My sense of justice has changed. My sense of what matters in the world has changed significantly because my understanding of truth has changed.
Yeah.
I got into theology because my sense of reality as to what I understood truth itself to be, the very conception of what reason is, changed because I read some philosophy and I studied it very deeply. Then, eventually I came to understand, well, no, this God stuff is not nonsense. A lot of stuff that I used to think was absolutely stupid. Maybe you've heard the Leibniz whole thing, this is the best of all possible worlds. That just sounds so asinine. Both Christians and atheists mock it. Well, after 10 years of reading philosophy, I realized, no, the motherfucker was right. He doesn't make a very good case for it himself, because you need to have a certain kind of background. You have to have a certain kind of understanding, and then what he says makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's rational to lock yourself in a dogma before you've really delved into the depths and seen for yourself, is what I believe actually true? Do I know what truth could even possibly be itself? Can I recognize truth when it is there, when it is present? How would I do so? And once you have those answers, then even then you still don't lock yourself in a box. I don't lock myself into a box. I don't prejudge things, and I don't pre-think things. They come to me as they come, and if they make sense, they make sense. If they don't make sense, they don't make sense.
So that could go the other way, though. The truth could keep, revealing itself, and you could keep having revelations, and they might lead you eventually in the opposite direction, which is, they might lead you there.
No, not in this case.
Towards my position.
Not in this case.
Well, I mean, that could happen later, though.
No, not in this case.
But you're saying follow the truth wherever it goes, right? That's your
right.
position.
And the truth here is not one. I'm swapping things one after another. I'm I thought, this was the truth. Nope, out of the window. This thing's the other truth. That's how it used to go. And even then, it didn't quite go that way with me. But that's how I viewed it going. Now it doesn't go that way. Now I know what truth actually is. I have no questions. I have no doubts anymore. I have 100% absolute certainty of what truth actually is. I know when I see it. I know how it works. I know how to.
Well, that's
prove
how
it.
I feel about That's how I feel about justice.
Right. I think
Like,
that's
I
how we
know
all
it
feel at every point. No, I'm not saying intuitively. I know it 100% explicitly. I could explain it to you. Now, that assumes a certain kind of rational capacity, both on my side and your side. My capacity to explain, your side to receive, which is not always equal. So I'm not of the view, for example. I've long lost the idea that if something were true and it were rational, it would be so obvious that you could just present to somebody and like it would bowl them over with just the rational force. Rational force means nothing against somebody who refuses to think something. And a lot of people who refuse to think don't even realize that they refuse to think. Because what you have is these ingrained attitudes of subjective bias, which you don't even realize you have because they seem so obvious that to question them is unthinkable. And, you're like, I know what truth is. I would know when something is true, and this person is not saying something true, even if they are. And you are sincere in that moment. I've been there. I think we all are there at many points in our lives, constantly through our lives, in which we feel absolutely certain.
The guy. Hold on, sorry, I was in the wrong.
Okay. We feel absolutely certain. But once you kind of like calm down and open your eyes and like really like finally accept, fine, let me just look at this thing, like, and let me like get my prejudgments out of the way, and let's just do the exercise that I'm being told. Let me think the thing that I'm being told. Obviously the person explaining it better do a good job. But if they do a good job, you can get rid of your prejudices. You can pay attention to what they're saying. You can think through it, and then you can realize, in many instances, wow, like, how did I not get this before? It is true that I just was blind to it. And it, to me, at least in my experience, looking back, I realized I really did not want to see the truth because I was so convinced that I was already right, that there's nobody that's going to come around to show me some other way of what correctness is, what truth is, and all these things. That, the most sensible things you just refuse to see, and you always project on it, and that happens. But you can also tell, honestly, you can also tell. There is a certain way that you can train your mind to lose this attitude of preconception, at least when it comes to very clear, abstract things. On day-to-day things, there will always be some kind of prejudice. You have to make snap judgments on many things. It is what it is. But on a lot of these like fundamental stuff, as far as philosophy, physics, morality, all these other things, you can know it 100%, and you can know whether you're in it or outside of it, whether you're following it through with some projections of your own or not, fairly clearly. And it's constructive, and that's the difference. So you're not swapping one truth for another. When you get to a new insight, it's not like, I was wrong, and like, let me just adopt this new view. No, there's a reason I believe the thing that I believed before. It wasn't a complete delusion. It wasn't just based on a complete misunderstanding. There was understanding in there. The thing is, like, the new insight that you gain from somebody else showing that you're wrong is there was some limited aspect of what I was thinking, which they had, and I didn't. So I see my limitation. I see how what they say does cohere with what I used to think, but it reframes what I used to think. With the view of God, this does not change. God is literally the last concept. I've already gone through my materialist phase. I used to be a hardcore materialist. was a militant atheist for a while. I was not just a person who was angry at God or whatever. I was just genuinely convinced by reason that, well, look, religion is stupid. I've been lied to all my life. I felt angry about that. I think everybody does when they first get out of it.
Mhm.
And eventually I just mellowed out and realized, well, these people didn't consciously try to abuse me. They weren't trying to brainwash me. Are there charlatans? Yes. But, is the vast majority of people who believe this stuff trying to harm anybody? Are they, trying to, like, purposely delude themselves? No, this is as best as they can do. Is it a cope for many of them? Yes, it is. Is it a way in which, for many of them, it gives them a compass in their life, because without it, they wouldn't know what the hell to do? Yes, it is. And eventually I just realized not to be angry about that. And so, the first turn to God that, like, made sense to me was the pantheistic stuff, in which I heard people like Alan Watts, and they start talking about this God that is not, a person. It's not like a judgmental guy, and all these other things. And, it's really just like the totality of the universe and reality. You're like, well, that makes sense. But you still like, well, yeah, but there's no purpose in calling it God. It's just the universe. It's just reality. And slowly, over about a decade, I started seeing more and more why you would want to call it God and why the word God fits. But, that's a personal development. And so, something like abstract arguments, like what I'm saying, very rarely change people's minds. Although I have surprisingly changed some people's minds, amazingly.
True. But God, to call it God, here's why. Here's another reason why I won't call it God. Worship. To worship it. If it's God, you have to worship it.
No, I don't.
You don't? Isn't that the whole point? Like, it's God, so it's...
Not even in Christianity, dude. Not even in Christianity.
Yeah, you have to worship Jesus in
No,
Christianity.
not even in Christianity. Nowhere in the Bible does Jesus say that he wants you to, like, lay down and worship and pray to him, or, go like, hallelujah, glory to Jesus. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that. Nowhere in the early stuff does the church's practices. What you get out of the Christian standpoint of worship is that to worship God is to, guess what? What does Jesus ask you to do? Love your neighbor as yourself. Love God as you love your neighbor.
We said that, like, take up your cross with, take up my cross with me, and
yes, follow his path.
Gets to the Father except through
me, meaning his example. I mean, he was the living example. So live your life like Jesus did. Follow his example. That's what it means to take up the cross. And what did Jesus say that he was doing?
You don't believe the Bible says that Jesus is God?
Sure, I believe Jesus is God. But that has nothing to do with worshiping a guy named Jesus. If God shows up to you and says, Jesus, look, here's the truth, it doesn't matter what Jesus in particular. He could have been named Joe. He could have be named like Abdullah. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Well, he doesn't care.
Well, Jesus is God. Okay, so are you God and am I God like he is? Or
yeah, well, yes, actually, if you get into Christian theology, this is exactly one of the things that comes up. Yes, one of the consequences of Christian theology, one of the consequences of Christology, is that you are indeed sharing in the essence of God. When Jesus says, you will do greater things than I did, he's not kidding. When he says, you will join me in heaven with the Father, he's not kidding. And why would you join him in heaven with the Father? Because you will share in the essence. You will be like Jesus. Why? Because just like Jesus, you have the spark of God within you. It's called deification. So, when it's called the day of resurrection, you can look at this as particularly in Orthodox and Catholic theology. There's talk about how you will shed the limitations of human nature finally. And what does purification entail? It entails rising to the purity of God. What is that? It's deification, becoming one with God, sharing in the nature of God, sharing in the creation with God.
My understanding is that you remain human even after you die and go to heaven. You're still a human soul.
No. The human is Jesus. So the human is not here on earth. The human is Jesus. Jesus is called the Son of Man, not the Son of God. Why? Because Jesus is the perfect archetype of the human.
Mm-hmm.
So, humanity is modeled on Jesus, not Jesus after the human. So there's a lot of things that lay Christians don't know a thing about. But when you look at the Christian theology, it's pretty fucking amazing because it's not at all what most people think.
You're talking about Catholic theology?
Catholic and Orthodox Christian theology. And if you look at the more advanced theological understandings of worship, for example, worship has nothing to do with you going to church, praying, none of that. Worship has to do with actually doing the work of God. How do you worship God? Do what you were sent to this life to do. Which is what? To be free. To be you.
Okay.
There's a positive way of doing every single thing that you desire in this world. You're a very angry person? Well, you can still be a Christian. You can still do your due duty. You can still be yourself. You can go kick people's ass in a boxing ring. You can entertain people. Don't kill people. Don't hurt people maliciously. You can take it out in sports. There's a positive way to do absolutely everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I would say, if you are interested in, which I'm not saying that you ought to be interested in it, by the way, because I don't think everybody's supposed to be interested in it. Different people have different aims in life, different purposes that they ought to live. Not everybody has to be religious to live a good life. There are plenty of atheists that I assure you are going to heaven, if you want to understand it that way.
See, okay, what about hell?
Well, there's plenty of Christians that are going to hell.
So there is hell.
Yeah, but it's not eternal punishment. You can either look at hell as already, hell's an ongoing process here. So the process of people's own ignorance, their self-inflicted pains and woes. You become a dirty politician, you fuck over the people. You may think that person lives a great life. You're like, look, they're filthy rich. They got the wife, 4 kids, a couple of mansions, and they fucked us all over, and they got away with it. They live until like Henry Kissinger, for example. The motherfucker died of old age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
I think nonetheless that man, already lived his own hell, to the extent that one experiences a lot of dissatisfaction in this life at one's own deeds without even knowing it, and it takes wisdom to notice that you're doing it to yourself. But also, if you find it worth believing, if it satisfies you in any way, there is a punishment. But the punishment isn't infinite. After all, the crimes you committed aren't infinite.
Yeah. Doesn't it say in have you read Ecclesiastes?
It's probably 20 years ago.
But it's interesting because it talks about how there's no heaven and people and animals, they all just go to the same place when they die, and
that's a Jewish thing,
never
though.
Punished. Oh.
Like the Jews don't believe in heaven. The Jews believe in Olam Haba, which is the world to come. But the world is here. It's not the resurrection is not a spiritual resurrection. The resurrection is a physical resurrection here on earth.
A lot of Christians believe that, don't they?
Not necessarily. Like heaven is now, for example, but heaven is a spiritual domain. Whereas the Jews think you die, your spirit dissipates, and then God recreates it at the end of time. The earth's rejuvenated, Jerusalem is built again, and all the good people who were faithful are reborn here again, as they were at their prime. And then the Jews think that hell doesn't exist because hell, you die, and hell is just separation from God, which is annihilation, which certain Christians do believe as well, by the way.
Yeah.
Mainly because the doctrine of hell is a stupid doctrine that's actually three doctrines in one, mistranslated. There's Gehenna, there's Hades, then there's, I forget what the third one is, but it's three words which are translated all as hell. Yeah, Sheol. Yeah, three words were translated as hell. They don't mean the same thing. None of them have eternity as their definition. Yeah, the word eternity is translated from the word aeonis in Greek. But aeonis doesn't mean eternity. Aeonis means long time. So, like, as far as like, oh, you're going to burn in hell eternally, there is no such doctrine in Christianity. That's just like literally biblically false.
No,
Just say
Jesus talks
Ionis.
about lake of fire. I think he says something like that.
Well, the lake of fire is a
Or did I
metaphor of
mishear?
Apocalypse, or Revelations, which is not hell. The lake of fire is the final death. That's not eternal punishment. That's annihilation.
Oh yeah.
Anyways, all I would advise you is don't be too quick to make up your mind on this stuff just yet. There's at least one thing that you have to do before you do that, which is you got to find out whether you really know what reason is, and therefore what truth itself is, so that you can recognize it and be sure of where you see it and when you see it.
Well,
there's a big book on that. It's called The Science of Logic by G.W.F. Hegel. It's the only book that answers that.
Because it's like dialectical, I guess. Well, he doesn't use the term dialectical.
No, it's not about being dialectical. It's that it doesn't presuppose what reason is. It just sets out to think. And by thinking and looking at what we do when we actually think, it draws out the very structures of thinking and how thinking actually works, as opposed to how we want to believe that it works. So when you see how thinking actually works and how things really make sense, then you understand what a real concept is, what real intelligibility actually is, and how you can look at the world with any concept that you like, or rather at any concept before you even look at the world, and know, is this actually a valid frame of reality or is it not? Not only is it not only valid, if you do the whole thing properly, you can be assured that you can tell whether it is sound. Not just that, well, it's formally true. It is like content-wise true. It's a huge deal. And that way you can get away from all these stupid things that everybody else disputes about. People are like, oh, well, you want to talk about God. Well, which God are you talking about? Well, whatever you might think, in general, not you, but everyone, in general, might believe. I define God as a shoe. I define God as a bee. I define God as the sun. Yeah, those don't matter. Those are people who are just like dicking around pretending with language. The other people are like, oh, well, the God of Islam, the God of Christianity, the God of the Hindus, God of the Taoists. Which God are you talking about? Well, you can actually tell which is the right concept of God. Because you don't have to, a lot of these people, they begin with personal revelations. Like I had some mystical experience. I experienced the oneness of the universe. I experienced, an angel coming down and talking to me. I experienced a voice in my head, some spirit, premonition, whatever. And a lot of these people, once you understand what actual concepts are, you'll find out that a lot of these people happen to have actually correct ideas. Just incomplete correct ideas. But the reason why they have correct ideas, well, it's based on not good reasons. Well, they're actually not rational at all. It's just intuitions, experiences, and whatnot. And just because you experience something doesn't mean that you really know what it is. It's like you can ask a Christian this, or a Jew, or even Islamist this, how do you know that the Bible is written by God? They're like, well, if they're not stupid, they won't say, well, because the Bible said so, right? They might say, well, I know from the light of reason that in some way, and that's almost never going to happen unless they're like studying very strange classical theology. Most of the time they'll say, look, I had some kind of personal experience, some family member had personal experience, and I'm like, even if God came down in front of you, revealed himself to you, how would you know that it is God? And they're like, I would just know. Well, yes, but how? Just like how I know, that my car is my car. If I had never seen my car, and then my car, was in front of me, but I'd never seen my car, how would I know that it's my car? I don't have its license plate. I don't know its color. I don't know its model. My car could literally be in front of me, but I don't know that it's my car. The same thing. Unless I already know somehow what God is, some being giving me an experience and coming in and saying a bunch of things, like the Darth Dawkins stupid people. They're like, I had personal revelation and God says, God revealed it to me. Well, how did you know that being that revealed to you is God? Well, they're not going to say, well, because it said so. They're going to say something like, well, I just knew it. I had some intuition, blah, blah, blah. But that's not good enough, right? But people don't understand, like even Christians, I'll bring this up with Christians all the time. I'm like, look, the devil can do miracles too. Like the whole thing about, oh no, the Antichrist, and people like every decade freaking about the Antichrist, is based on what? How's the Antichrist supposed to fool you? Because they're gonna do the fucking miracles. They're gonna talk the sweet talk. They're gonna get you that way. It's not gonna be a guy, twirling mustache twirling villain coming down, and doing villainy things, and then people just flocking to them. No, it's gonna be a guy who's gonna look good, do good things that seem good. And, like the way that it's even classical in the Bible, man. The way the devil gets you is not through lies, straight up lies. The devil gets you by telling you half truths. So, like, you ask these people, well, how would you know that it was God and not Satan? Because they're like, oh no, the spirit of Allah, is just Satan. It's just Satan like lying to you. Sure, it says some good things, but then like these things are wrong, and that's how we know that it's clearly isn't God. But the point is, you have to know. Without knowing, God in truth could come down, reveal themselves to you. But if you don't know, it might as well be the devil.
Well, but you learn how to recognize that by reading Hegel?
Yeah. Because, I mean, you read around mystical stuff, you can see that a lot of people are, like, dicked around with by so-called spirits. A lot of people are dicked around with by mystical consciousness, and they come up with, like, really bad conclusions. You know, if you think you meet God, or you had the God state, you know, God consciousness or whatever, and your conclusion when you come back here is like, shit, better off myself because, you know, this whole world is false. No, you didn't really meet God. Because this world exists. You know, things aren't superfluous in reality. Everything exists for a reason. And the reason is not for you to deny the very existence that you were given and to, you know, escape from the very reality which is your essence.
Yeah, well, yeah. Something to think about.
Yep.
I'm gonna hit the hay.
Yeah, all right, man. Yeah. Good night.